Okay, this is now the tarot process, part 22, and this might be long because I want to look at two questions. One, I'll begin with JoJo, who's emailed to say that the Rider deck doesn't resonate with her, or she doesn't resonate with it. And so I'd like to talk, the first part, about decks in general and how, I don't know, I want to talk about the Rider deck and other decks and about how to read cards. And then the second one is for Laurie. Laurie said that she wants to be, or she is on the path of worthiness, but she keeps messing up. And so what this is for anybody who feels unworthy, or who is hard on yourself and thinks you don't have much value, or at times when you think, I don't have much value, I don't have much worth. And I'd like to make 3 points about why you already are worthy. And I'm going to talk about the horoscope, the planet Mars, and then Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden. So this might be okay. The other thing is with the Rider deck, I've been putting off doing it because it's kind of complicated, and so I've got some notes written down here, and I'm just going to go through it, whether it's perfect or not. So if I can read these notes. Oh yeah, okay, so when it comes to choosing a deck, I always use the Rider deck because I think you can read it and make sense of it and come up with things that are helpful to the questioner, as well as giving a correct answer to the question that's been asked. And I don't think you can do that as easily or as well with other decks. Not that I'm against other decks, but let me get into that. So I think when it comes to reading cards, or when it comes to choosing a deck, that it depends on, do you want to read the card that's there, or do you want to work from memory? And it also depends on if you want the questioner to understand what you're saying and to be able to appreciate what it is that you're saying, or where you're getting the information from. And that's easier with the Rider deck than it is with an awful load of other decks. So, point number one. Oh yeah, okay, so I think that was point one, about it depends what you want. The other thing is, I was remembering when I first started with the tarot, there weren't that many books that you could buy. I bought this Monique Sadhu, the tarot, and it was all about magic and Hebrew letters and rituals, and I tried reading it and memorizing it, and I couldn't. And then I bought Paul Foster Case, the tarot, and I liked it because it seemed to be quite profound, and it was a bit about magic and a bit about directions in space and cubes, and it all seemed very important, and that I ought to remember it or memorize it or understand it. But then I got stuck because I had the Rider deck at the time, or maybe I also had the Marseille deck. That was one of the first ones I got, or the Swiss deck. And so in the Paul Foster Case book, he talks about the emperor is sitting with his legs crossed, and this means blah, blah, blah. And I thought, that's really important, that's really useful, I ought to remember that. But then when I looked at my Rider deck, the emperor's sitting with his legs in a different position. And so I always thought there was something not quite right about having the card in front of me and picking the meaning from somewhere over here, from my memory or from a book that I'd read whenever I happened to read it. And I always wanted to be able to look at the card and answer the question from the card in front of me, rather than have to rely on memory, and rather than have to try to fit meanings I had learned elsewhere with the card in front of me to answer the question. I didn't like that. The other thing is, the Fool card in the Rider deck, the Fool is looking to the left side of the card, or the left edge of the card, whereas in the Robin Wood deck, the Fool is going off to the right, facing in the direction of the right-hand side of the card, or the right edge. So, the Fool in the Rider deck is going one way, and so left and right can be sunrise and or sunset, right? Or rather, sunrise or sunset. So, in the Rider deck, the Fool's going, let's say, to sunrise. But in the Robin Wood deck, the Fool is going in the direction of sunset. They're not going the same direction. So can you take the meaning from the Rider deck and apply it to the Robin Wood deck? So the Fool in the Rider deck can be new beginnings, but in the Robin Wood deck, the Fool is going towards sunset. So it's going towards endings rather than new beginning. I mean, an ending is followed by a new beginning, but the first step is an ending. So I think it's asking for confusion. You're going to confuse yourself as a reader, and you may also confuse the questioner if you try to take a meaning you learned with one deck that's particular or specific to one deck and try to apply it to another deck. I don't think it works. Oh yeah. And because we're dealing with words and meanings, we might as well just use index cards. So you can get a 50-cent pack of index cards, and on one of them you write the Fool, and then the Magician, the Four of Cups, whatever it happens to be, and then you just pick a card at random, and it's not based on anything in front of you, it's based on the words and the meanings that you've learned from elsewhere. So you really need the card if you're dealing with words? And I don't think you do. Oh yeah. At the same time, somebody left a comment. I said write your own tarot book, and they said what about designing your own deck? And I didn't reply to it, but I'm replying now. It's really, really difficult to design a tarot deck. It seems easy, because all you do is you've got the idea of, let's say, the Magician, who's somebody with power and understanding, and it's not easy to design a tarot deck it can be decorative and it can have pretty colours and nice shapes, but that's one thing if it's decorative and you can put it on your wall. But if somebody's got a question like, am I going to get promotion? And you look at your self-designed Magician card, you can think, okay, it's a Magician, and the Magician means this and this and this and power and beginning, so yes, you're going to get the promotion. But that's not actually reading the card in front of you. So one point is it's very difficult to design a tarot deck. The other is I can't remember the other point. Okay. Then I wrote down Deviant Moon, because people really like the Deviant Moon tarot deck by Patrick Valenzuela, I think his name is. And I remember looking at that particular deck years ago when people were, I think when it first came out. And on the Hermit card, you've got one of the things about the Deviant Moon, I think it was the design was based on an insane asylum, an old asylum that was no longer in use anymore. So there's a kind of strange feeling about it. Maybe that's why it's called the Deviant Moon, because it's the moon, but it's not quite, I don't want to say it's not quite right, but it's got this other dimension or other feeling about it. So in the Hermit card, the Hermit's sitting there, I think, or standing, but there's a fish skeleton on the ground in front of the Hermit. So what do you do with the fish skeleton? I don't know why it's there, and maybe Patrick explains why he included it, and maybe it's about the fact that the Hermit doesn't have anything to eat. and so, or he's used up what he had, and all he's left with is a skeleton. But the skeleton, the fish is dead, and doesn't have any life anymore. So does that have a meaning? Is that significant for the card itself? Or is it the fact that the bones are left, the outline is left, or the structure, the inner structure is there? So let's say somebody wants to know, am I going to get a promotion? And you look at, you're using the Deviant Moon deck, and you get the Hermit, and the person says to you, the question says, what does the fish skeleton represent? What are you going to do? I mean, does it indicate, yes, you're going to get the promotion, or no, you're not? Does it mean that the promotion is dead because it's a skeleton? Or does it mean that be clear about the structure of the job or of your abilities when it comes to applying for the job? And I don't know what to say about that. Whereas the Rider deck is easier and simpler. And I think I wrote down at the moment, because I think there's something about a reading is sort of for that questioner at that time, asking that question. And there's something about it, and we pick cards at random. So I think there's something significant about the moment of asking the question and the card that comes up in that moment. And if you're looking at a card and dealing with it at that time, I think that works, and it gives a more valid and a more useful reading or a more useful answer to the questioner, rather than looking at the card and then trying to remember what was over here and bring it into the present. Somehow, looking at the card and making sense of it in that instant is more correct, I think, when it comes to reading a card or reading the moment, than depending on your memory. I can't read this. What have I got here? Oh yeah. The other thing is, the Rider deck has pictures on each card, and other decks have, let's say, the Three of Cups shows 3 cups. So if I'm using the Marseille deck and the Three of Cups comes up, I tell you what the answer is. And all you can do is believe it or not. You can't really reply, or you can't really see why I'm saying what I'm saying. The Three of Cups in the Rider deck shows the 3 women dancing. So there's harmony, there's celebration, there's enjoyment, there's being in step with other people. And so I say to you, yes, it's going to work because people are going to get along with each other. You can look at that Three of Cups and say, okay, I can agree, I can see why you would say that. Whereas if I'm looking at the Marseille deck and I've got the Three of Cups, I tell you, yes, it's going to work and people will get along with each other. You, the questioner, have no idea why I'm saying that. So I think the Rider deck, even though you personally may not care for it, I think it speaks to the reader, and it also speaks to the questioner. At the same time, the Rider deck isn't that particular. You know, you get the Tarot of the Cat people. What happens if you don't like cats? Or you get goth decks, or you get decks that have got a particular point of view. Whereas the Rider deck doesn't really have any point of view. It's just pictures that could belong to any time period. And it means that any questioner can look at that picture and get something out of it. It doesn't depend on them having a certain philosophy. And so with the 6 of coins that I've got here, that I separated, okay, there's the 6 of coins, right? So let's say I talk about how the importance of being generous, let's say, or helping out other people. And so maybe give them cash if you can afford it, or maybe give it to charity. Right, so I'm talking about that. The questioner can look at the picture and see 3 people and think, oh, this person up here, that's Bill. And so they can take a picture that is kind of nondescript, or that's not particularly specific, And they can look at the picture and they can think, okay, that's Bill, and this must be his 2 children. And so they've got a memory of Bill being generous to his children, let's say. And so when you, the reader, talk about generosity or helping out other people, you're talking in a general kind of a way, because a reading can be an outline. You give the outline of the answer and the questioner fills in the details. So I look at this card and I talk about being generous and being kind, and you, the questioner, think that's Bill and this is what he did for his children. So it can root or plant the meaning in the questioner's mind so they make more sense of it. So all in all, use the Rider-Waite, even if you don't like it. Okay, so question 2, if you feel unworthy. Okay, I have 3 points to make. Let me make first, in a horoscope, Mars represents personal creative energy. It represents other things as well, but the most important thing is it's personal creative energy. So my question, if you're feeling unworthy or lacking value, what are you doing that's creative? And if you're not doing something that's creative, start doing it and you'll feel much better and you'll feel valuable and you'll feel worthy. Because we've got Mars in our horoscope somewhere. We're supposed to be creative personally. And that means maybe you write, maybe you paint, you sketch, you have a blog, you take photographs, you take video on your phone, and you write and you watch a movie and write a review that you keep to yourself or you share with other people. We really ought to be doing creative stuff, whatever that happens to mean. I'm reminded that I made notes earlier and I wrote down about Jean-Luc Godard, who was this 60s famous French film director. And he said, movies will become good when film is as cheap as pencils. And most people have cell phones, right? So you've got a video camera in your hand, and you can record, you can take photographs, you can take videos, you can then put the videos together into something, into memories or into something that you can give to your grandchildren or your children, and it's your point of view and you're expressing yourself creatively. So if you're feeling unworthy, make sure you're doing something creative. If you do something creative, it'll make you feel worthy and of value. So that's point number 1. Point number 2, I need to... Okay, this may seem a bit weird. And I need to talk about God, which... Let's say I don't want to get religious, but I want to show you this. This is what a horoscope looks like, 12 houses, right? So the third is the third. It's called the third because it's the third from the first. So the third is how you communicate. But if you start with the 7th house, which is the marriage partner, 7, 8, 9, the third from the 7th is how the marriage partner communicates. So if you've got a horoscope or a horoscope spread and the question is, how does my marriage partner communicate? Why do I misunderstand what they say? You would look to the 9th house because that's the house of communication from the marriage partner. Or let's say you've got friends and you keep misunderstanding what they're talking about. The 11th is the house of friendships, right? So 11, 12, 1. The first house will show you how your friends communicate. And so you would look at the card there, or the planets and signs involved there, to get an idea of, why there would be miscommunication or misunderstanding, right? So the 5th house is children, but it's your first child, right? It just is. The 9th house represents God, which we can discuss what we mean by God, but it's a bit like there is some harmonious being, or there is, if you take a painting that has nice combination of colours, or you take a piece of music that is harmonious and the notes all go together to conjure up or create some kind of atmosphere, there's harmony. And maybe what we mean by God is harmony. when there is harmony, that shows the existence of, or the presence of, something worthwhile, right? So let's call it God. And the thing I want to tell you that is really mind-blowing, the 9th house is the house of God, and the 1st house is the ascendant. It represents you, right? So if we start with the 9th house, which is God, and go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, the 5th from the 9th is the first child of God, and the ascendant is you. So each one of us individually is the first child of God, the first child of harmony. So if you feel unworthy, it's not actually true, because how can the first child of a harmonious situation be disharmonious? You can't be. That's what I wanted to say about that. And the third thing is Adam and Eve. Okay, so here's Adam and Eve, right, in the Garden of Eden. Okay, right, so I'll put it down in a moment. So we've got Eve on the one side and Adam on the other. And in the Garden of Eden, you've got two trees, the tree of life and the tree of knowledge of good and evil. And Adam and Eve are told, you can eat from the tree of life, but don't eat from the tree of knowledge of good and evil. And they did. And they get thrown out of heaven, and they're made to suffer. As are we all, maybe. So Eve, in the Rider deck, I'm using the Rider deck here, Eve is on the right-hand side of the picture, or on the left-hand side of the picture. She's on the free will side of the chart. Eve has free will. Adam doesn't. Adam is controlled by circumstances. So this is the Rider deck, and I don't know whether Waite and Pamela, who designed the deck, knew this or it was intentional. Maybe it was just they were inspired, and the Rider deck is actually an inspired deck, and there's more in it than we appreciate or understand. However, so Eve was tempted, and she ate of the fruit of the tree of knowledge of good and evil, and Adam followed suit, as was inevitable. So I was trying to think about the difference between life or the tree of life and the tree of knowledge of good and evil. And I was remembering some years ago, in winter, we had an ice storm, and it rained, and it was freezing rain, and it stuck to the trees, and it got too heavy for the branches, and all night you would hear crack, and this loud cracking of branches being broken by the weight of the ice. And the next day I went outside, and there were branches everywhere, driveways, the road, snow everywhere. So what happened was, and if you've ever been through a tornado or a hurricane or some natural disaster, what happens is everybody joins together and they cooperate and fix it. And you don't, maybe you get annoyed at the weather briefly, but you don't agonize over how terrible the weather is, how terrible nature is. You just get on with it, because this kind of thing happens, right? So you cooperate and fix the problem or solve the problem and work together and begin again. Whereas, by contrast, so you begin again and life keeps going and you go on forever. Whereas I used to have a neighbour who worked for a financial planner, and one day she went into her office and she realised something was wrong. And it turned out that the financial planner had lost most of the money that people had given him, and he took off with the rest and was never heard from again. So this is like the tree of knowledge of good and evil. You have good because you've got all your savings, and then you've got evil because it's stolen from you. And what does that do to you? You hate the financial planner. You regret, you beat yourself up because you gave him the money. You think you're doomed, you're never going to make it back again. So what does it do? You know good and evil. Yes, good for you. You know good and evil. Good can turn into evil. Evil can turn into good, but good can turn into evil more easily, it seems. So what does it do? You know good and evil, and it kills you. And that's why Adam and Eve were told, don't eat from the tree of knowledge of good and evil. So when you're feeling unworthy, eat the fruit of the tree of life, not the tree of knowledge and good and evil, of good and evil. Fruit comes from a root that means to use and to enjoy. So when you're feeling unworthy or down about yourself, remember you're the first child of God. You have personal creative energy and do something with it. You have to act, you have to do something. You can't just sit there and be miserable. Or if you get up from being miserable and actually do something, it changes your life, changes you. So choose the tree of life and use it and enjoy it. Use life and do something with it and enjoy what you're doing, or enjoy the result of your labours. Okay, that's it for the moment. I don't know what you think of this. Leave a comment, and again, we can always come back to this and relate back to it in future videos. But tell me what you think. I hope you enjoyed it. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in a few days. Okay, bye-bye.